Welcome back to Rounding the Bases Extra Innings on YouTube. We've got some 4 final questions for our authors, our superstars, Pat O'Neill and Tom Coffman.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's I'll tell you. If Ted Sullivan were selling you guys, he would say that you guys are superstars. And so first off, I encourage everybody to check out the audio version of this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get it. It's just a lot of fun, really great storytelling, not to mention humor. And just also really cool to kind of hear how 2 guys that have finished their previous careers have gone on to do something together in a fun way. So that brings me to question number 1 as we round the bases. And Pat, I want to start with you because I think you're the first person I've ever interviewed that wrote a book on a baseball guy in the 1800s after a career having to do at one point as a live-in caretaker of a cemetery. What in the world is going on? Yeah, I know you're a newspaper and all that type of stuff too. But what stood out to me, the caretaker of a cemetery.
Right. Well, Joe, my wife and I got married in high school, and so I did a lot of jobs. I was a limo driver for the Grateful Dead. Sometimes I was cut grass at the Meadowbrook Country Club and wrote concert reviews for the Star. And many of those concert reviews I wrote while in the chapel in the middle of the cemetery late at night before I hustled them down to the Star for the morning paper. But so it's like, do whatever you got to do to, make a living. And then before I finally got a job on a little newspaper out in Western Colorado, and eventually became the editor and then did what every good, successful editor of a newspaper would do. I opened a saloon.
Of course. Well, you have to be able to have a place when everybody's done with their deadlines to go.
It's funny because we were in a boom town in Parachute, Colorado during oil shale boom, and we became media central because people all this media from all over the world was coming in to cover this, and they'd say, well, where do I go? Like, just go to the Irish bar and ask for Pat O'Neill. He'll tell you who to talk to, where to go, all that kind of stuff. So it was,
That's good stuff. Tom, I'll flip to you for question number 2. I mean, if Pat was limo driving the Grateful Dead around, at least at some point, you were having future famous rock stars sleep.
No, you were banging your head at some rock concert venue outside of Lawrence. Is what he was doing in the outhouse out in the cornfield there.
Yeah, it was. We had a place on Vermont Street, and it got to be, I wouldn't say infamous, but we were welcoming and hospitable. And we had some friends that would come and they'd drive their nasty old broken down vans over and after shows. And one night we were at a show and some friends of ours from Nashville said, hey, we got these kids that, from the South who we know, and they are coming to this part of the world for the first time. Check them out. Be nice to them like you were to us and everything. So we went down there on a Monday night and watched the Mortal Micronauts open for these guys at Off the Wall Hall. It was $2 to get in, and we probably didn't pay. And that's the night that REM came over to the house and slept on our floor.
So that's a lot of years ago. I mean, that's like the very earliest years of REM, I would assume.
Yeah.
81.
Yeah. 81.
And I was just saying they're still at it. They're not really still at it, although all of their names in one form or another pop up. I'm a big REM fan, always have been since I can.
They were nice guys in 1981. Good house guys.
Yeah. I mean, they may still be now, but they don't need to be crashing on anyone's couch.
I think
that's right. Probably the moral of that.
Yeah.
And I assume at that point, you have no idea that these guys are going to become superstars, right?
Of course not. Yeah. Of course not.
Yeah. I don't have to tell you about my introduction to baseball.
Yeah.
Because it's, Tom and I both are baseball fans, and that's why we ended up getting together and writing this book. And by the way, we had a lot of fun doing it. I mean, the partnership was great because it was like, we just did it for fun. It wasn't like, series got to meet this deadline, blah, blah, blah.
Right. You don't have the pressures that you always had in your careers like all of us have.
And he wrote what he liked, pieces of the book he liked. I wrote pieces that I liked, that I was interested in and all that. But my first introduction to baseball was with the Kansas City A's. And I think it must have been 1964 or something. I was in grade school. And my dad pulled me out of St. Francis Xavier a couple different times during the winter to go out to the old municipal stadium and pose in front of him. I was supposed to pose in front of Dick Hauser because they were trying to perfect the art of the 3D cutout, the 3-dimensional cutout, so they could, stand in front of the president and it's a cardboard cutout. Well, there's a local company that was developing that technology and that deal. So Dick Hauser doesn't show up for the first one, and I've got the Raisin Bran haircut. I'm the quintessential knucklehead baseball kid, and he says. So my dad looks around the A's locker room, finds the biggest uniform he can find, belonged to Dave Wickersham, who was a pitcher, and he puts it on. And so they take the pictures. I had to go back after trying to get the lighting right and all that. And then eventually they made a cardboard cutout of my dad. Now, Dad's in a baseball uniform with black socks and dress shoes. And they had this cutout, and I posed in front of it like 2 or 3 different times until they got the light right. And then they took it to spring training, and they used my picture in front of like Mickey Mantle's locker and all that kind of stuff. So that was my claim to baseball fame. But so later on, I have 6 younger brothers, so we used that cardboard cutout that we kept in the basement. And when they wouldn't go to bed, and I was the oldest, I'd take it up and put it outside their bedroom window. They're scared the crap out of it. They called me the man, and they wouldn't go to they would go to sleep.
That's one way to do it. The pranks, by the way, I mean, that right there is pure baseball too, right? Because the pranks never stop.
Yeah,
got to be able to do that. Third question as we round the bases, I assume that you guys are popping up at a lot of events and certainly Irish fests. Maybe even around the country, just because of this book now. And I found it interesting, Pat, that you have quite a bit of history here with Irish Fest. You co-founded this, right?
Yeah, I was one of the founders, and my daughter Kelly runs it. But yeah, and then we've done book signings in Dubuque. We're looking at doing one in St. Louis. We're at the Milwaukee Irish Fest. Milwaukee was where Ted Sullivan was raised. Mm-hmm. But one thing we discovered, talking about small ball, is that when you look at the bestseller list these days, and any kind of bestseller list, 70% of the authors are women. And so Tom and I were like surrounded by these authors selling books, and they're selling like hotcakes. so Tom and I, our challenge was any guy that walked by that had like a White Sox hat on or a Brewers hat, like, hey, come over here. Wait, I got something for you. That's how we sold books to the guys.
Hey, again, like in the spirit of Ted Sullivan, you got to sell it.
Got to hustle.
You got to hustle.
Mm-hmm. Then we did Ted Sullivan and left Milwaukee with after we sold all our
$12, $13. Yeah.
So yeah, enough for a beer if you're not at the stadium.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
This is true. Yeah.
Right. Look, there's. Well, I mean, you guys will appreciate this. I went to school at Wisconsin, so I saw that the chapter in here, not Milwaukee's best.
Oh my!
Well, when we wanted to drink cheap in college, it was Milwaukee's best.
Oh, yeah.
That was the way to go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. My daughter went to Marquette. That's when we first went to the Irish Fest back 20 years ago, and they had a bar there called the Lanch, the Avalanche, and it was a classic. I'm surprised they probably had one at KU too. Everything was made out of concrete. The seats, the tables, everything had a drain in the middle of the floor. So just a hose at the end of the night.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And I always say that it's just different up in Wisconsin. Yeah. It's the same thing as you'd have here or anywhere else in the country. It's just more and more and more, more bars, more beers, more, fish fries and everything that you would imagine, and I'm sure that Ted Sullivan was at home there. Although he wasn't a drinker, was that right or no?
That's right.
No, he really wasn't. He did
teetotaler.
One time he got off the wagon in
Juarez,
Mexico, and it wasn't pretty. He got conned into one of those ball games, where you throw the ball and try to knock the pins down. Yeah, and he got conned.
Got into the mezcal.
Never drank again, as far as we know.
Yeah. Kind of like that.
Well, but not really.
Not really. No.
My buddy Sean Foley. I don't know if you've met Sean, but Irish Baseball Hall of Fame, had one of the best baseball bars in the country in Manhattan, shut down during the pandemic, and he's an Irishman, and he doesn't drink. I've been with him many times before, and only one of the two of us was drinking, and it wasn't him. Anyway, we'll finish up with the walk-off question here. You guys mentioned during the audio version of the podcast that you were able to, track down some family, but not easy to do because it's a long, long time ago, and he didn't have kids. But I'm just curious, some of the feedback. Has there been any feedback from anyone that knew of him or had connections to him, and what you heard? And I mean, as much as we've wanted to joke around about this really unique personality, I know the two of you guys took this seriously too, in being biographers and chronicling this story that really hadn't been told. Any interesting feedback along the way?
Well, you ran into some broad who said she was a Sullivan at Milwaukee Irish Fest.
You can't use that term anymore.
Some nice lady.
Yes.
In Milwaukee, a woman who was a relation, which we knew she was. We didn't know where she was, but we had a couple of friends, genealogists, ran the whole family, and she did show up in Milwaukee, and she was just ecstatic. And then another relative in Ohio. So but the feedback's basically been real good on the book from everyone. I think what they realize is, I said, it's a story. It's a fun story. It's not like we're not going to overload you with stats and all that kind of thing. It just tells the tale of a real human being. And people ask us, Joel, all the time, well, is this book, is it true? I go, well, it's a book about the biggest bullshitter in baseball. So you have to decide which part's true and what's not, because we don't know.
But people seem to like the book. People seem to like it. So
don't know if everything that came out of his mouth was true, but the truth is that it came out of his mouth.
Right. And most of it's documented through newspapers.
There you go. You're our target audience there with that kind of head.
That's right. I get it, and I appreciate the book too. I have the book. Actually, Pat, it was your daughter that got me a copy of that, and I love it. You signed it, "Here's to Baseball, Beer, and Blarney," and Tom followed that up by saying "most of our favorite vices." So I suspect that that is the way you guys roll with that. It's a lot of fun. You guys know I love baseball. I get to talk about it every single day, but and don't get me wrong, I love the wins and losses. I love the stats. I don't even mind the new metrics. I love the way the game evolves. But the one constant since the beginning of time that I hope will go till the end of time is the stories of these characters in baseball. And this man is right up there based on the research that you two have done. So again, want to encourage everybody to check out the audio version of the podcast, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. There is a Facebook page if you want to learn more about appearances or getting a copy of the book. Just go to Facebook, Ted Sullivan, Barnacle of Baseball, or you could go to Amazon to purchase it there, and all the usual ways to do that. Gentlemen, Tom, Pat, really appreciate all the time that you spent with me today.
Hey, thanks for everything, Joel.
Thanks, Joel. We appreciate it.